All right, right now we're going to go through internal rate of return as far as an accounting spreadsheet tip. And internal rate of return is highly useful when you're doing up capital expenditures. You will be covering capital expenditures when you get to the cost analysis class. So knowing how to do this will help you when you get to cost analysis. Also, I'll probably have this same video out on my cost analysis blackboard because I know you're going to want a refresher in it. And you can come back and look at this refresher too. But net present value, we learned this a couple of weeks ago, right? If you get money in the future, that money is not worth the same as it is today. Which means that if I get $1,000 a year from now, and there's a 10% required rate of return, or saying discounting it at a 10% rate, what is it worth today? Today, it would be worth $909. Or if I put in my calculator and say $909, how much interest can I earn in a year? I could earn $91. 909 times 0.1 would give me $91. I add that to 909, I get my 1,000. Well, for 2 years, if I earned interest on $826 for 2 years, making 10%, I'd take it, put it in your calculator. You can do this, you put it in your calculator, 826 times 1.1 will give you 909, times 1.1 again, give you 1,000. So a net present value table tells me if I get $1,000 2 years from now, in today's terms, it's worth $826. Net present value says future money is not worth the same today. So if I get $1,000 2 years from now, today it's really only worth $826. This is why if you do the lottery, if someone ever wins the lottery, hopefully all of you will win the lottery. I win the lottery every day. I don't play it, and my taxes go down. So I win the lottery. But if you win the lottery and they say, oh, you win $10 million. Well, they pay you $1 million a year for the next 10 years. And so they will say you won $10 million. Well, if you go to that lottery and you say, well, I want the money now, they'll say, okay. But do you think they'll give you $10 million? No. They'll say, okay, the net present value of that $10 million in today's terms is they might end up paying you $6 or $7 million. They'll say, here's what it is worth. Did they get to advertise it was a $10 million lottery? Yeah. But they will set up a net present value table just like this and do up the calculations at a certain percentage, and they might use 5, 6%, who knows what they'll use. And then they'll give you the net present value of that funds, saying here in today's terms, it's worth X amount of dollars. And that's what they'll give you. Okay, so realize future cash is not worth the same as today's. So when we were doing net present value, and this was a little bit of a refresher of our net present value, but I do that because it really defines what you do in internal rate of return. This net present value says, okay, if I add up all the future cash flow for 10 years, in today's terms, it's worth $6,145, even though it's a full $10,000 that I would get over those terms. Really, today, it's only worth $6,145. If I subtract my investment, which was $5,000, my net present value is a positive $1,145. Now, in the net present value calculation, if you would have a positive number, it tells you it's a good idea to do it. Go for it. It's a go. Positive numbers when you're calculating net present value tells you it's a go. If it was a negative number, it'd say no go. If it's a 0, you flip a coin. Usually never turns up 0, but if it is, Heads I'll do it, tails I won't. But one thing interesting about it being a 0 is right now, with it being 10%, it's telling me it's a go. Do you think I'm really making over 11%? The internal rate of return is telling you what exactly am I making, right? What exactly am I making? Or, when this net present value would be 0, that tells you what your internal rate of return is. When the net present value is 0, when I would play with this number, and you think I could change this 10% to 11%? If I set up my Excel spreadsheet properly, I could, right? And if you don't know how to set up a net present value table, that's out there, right? I showed you how to do that, right? So, if I set this up and I put this in at 11%, I type in 0.11, hit enter, all of my factors changed. Well, everything changed here. All of my dollar amounts changed. And my total changed. Is my net present value still a positive number? Yes. Which this tells me that this particular investment, getting $1,000 for 10 years, is making more than 11%. Well, all I have to do is keep playing with this number. I can put this 11 to 0.12. Is it still a positive number? Yes. So it's above 12%. My internal rate of return is above 12%. You set up a spreadsheet like this, it's not that hard to play with. I just put in 13%, still a positive number. I'll put in 15%. Oh, I'm pretty close. 0.15, and I'm at within $19. So if I go 0.151, oh man, am I lucky. I didn't even have to play with more than that. 0.151 turned my net present value to 0. So what is my internal rate of return? My internal rate of return is 15.1%. So if you have a net present value table, which is not that hard to set up in Excel anymore, right? Set up an Excel spreadsheet, you can do a net present value table. If you have that, if you play with this rate of return to the point where the net present value is 0, that tells you that this is my internal rate of return. Is that easier to do now that we have Excel as a tool out there? When people were doing this by hand, I mean, the calculations, you just have to keep cranking it. It became rather difficult. Now, with Excel, you just play with the numbers, and within 2 minutes, I can tell you some internal rate of return. Get the net present value table out there, put in my cash flows, have my factors all set up based on the years, calculate the number, compare it to the investment, and within minutes I can tell you what any internal rate of return is on any particular product you have. Don't care how many years there are. Okay. Now this is useful because when you're doing up capital expenditures, two of the methods they use for determining what's a proper capital expenditure is doing net present value and then doing an internal rate of return. And doing up a spreadsheet in net present value and then playing with the percentage, you can calculate the internal rate of return on that also. This is very useful. I guarantee you when you take cost analysis, you will be using it. Because I will be telling you, go out, calculate the internal rate of return. I used to have to walk my class through how to do this. Now I won't have to. I'll just say, you guys learn this in spreadsheets, so do it. And then I'll also put the